Hey everyone, Lisa Sabaniak here from lifelikeyoumeanit.com, coming to you live for the next hour for our online book club. That's right, the Life Like You Mean It book club, which, if you don't know about it yet, this book club is completely free. So, up until now, I've been running the book club about roughly every 6 weeks, maybe a titch longer here or there, depending on if a holiday kind of falls in there. And it's all surrounding the different books that I have read in the past or have got inspiration from recently. So they all tend to be more on the self help, spiritual type of path because I started this as a way of, I'm just going to double check and make sure that the health of the stream is, yeah, we're good. Okay. So I started the book club idea because books really had an incredible impact on my life. So when I was in my early 20s and I was really living still as a victim, being a victim of 10 years of child abuse, and I was really still in that kind of victim mentality, and I really wanted my life to be better, but I didn't know what to do about it. And I tried going to therapy, and at that time in my life, traditional therapy just wasn't something that I resonated with. And so it kind of made me feel like I was so broken that even therapy, the thing that's supposed to fix you, can't fix me. So going actually made me feel worse for a period of time. But I knew that there was a better life ahead for me, and it wasn't going to happen if I stayed where I was doing what I was doing. So I decided that I was going to start reading. And this was a big deal for me because back when I was in my 20s, I wasn't a reader. I just, it wasn't what I did. So to go into bookshops and pick up random books, I didn't know where to start. And I wasn't looking for books that dealt with child abuse because I was still in a bit of denial, actually, that that's really what my problem was and that I needed to overcome that. So I stuck to the self help section in the bookstores and I would just allow myself to go in. I wouldn't have any idea of what book I was going to get. And I would just roam up and down and just look at things. And sometimes it would be the color of the book or a picture on the front of the book or something that just spoke to me. And sure enough, every single time I did this, there was massive aha moments written in those books that I would highlight, I would write down, I would, really resonate with, and it would start to change my life. And then I would go back to the bookstore and I would do the same thing. And every single time it would lead me to reading something that I was ready to hear, right? That I needed to know, right? That it was the next step in my progression, in my healing journey. So I thought that working with all of the different people that I do, of course, I've got a core group of my clients who are abuse survivors themselves, but I've got a whole nother core group of people that are on their own spiritual path that don't have any type of abuse background whatsoever, but they're still looking to heal and grow and learn. And so I thought, you know what, bringing up a book club and making it completely free so it's completely accessible to anybody, and starting out by looking at some of these books that really impacted my life would be a great way for me to be able to give back and perhaps for some people to allow them to actually be held accountable because you're like, if you're anything like me, you've got great intentions of reading, you might even have a whole bookshelf full of books, and it's so hard sometimes to find the time to sit down and read them. So I thought, oh, I'll provide a book club, and that will allow people, give them 6 weeks of time. So you're forced with love to actually sit down and find some time to go through those books. So that is how I started this, and that started about a year and some ago, I would say. And I've been just doing them here on Facebook. And the only thing that you really get in addition for actually registering for this is you get put into my email list, which allows you to get, as soon as I finish this video today and it uploads onto YouTube, I send it to you via email so that you've got that link and you can refer back to it as many times as you want. And then you get the email that tells you what the next book is going to be with links in case you don't have it and the date for the next book club. And then, of course, you get a reminder as we get close within a couple of days of the next book club. So That's it, right? It's really nice and simple. But what I've decided to do now is the next book club that we run, so in 6 weeks' time, which if you have registered, you will get shortly, actually, in a couple of days, you will get an email that will let you know what that book is and when that book club date will be. That will be our last one that will run on Facebook. And what I'm going to do from this point on is all those people that are registered will get a link to Zoom, and it will be through a Zoom meeting that we will have our next Facebook or our next book club live. So that way you are still able to join live. You can come in without your camera on, of course, it's totally fine. But then if you do want to participate, if you've never been in a Zoom meeting, which after COVID, I imagine everybody now has been in a Zoom meeting. But if you haven't been, you'll join in, you'll be muted automatically, but there's a little chat box where you can raise your hand if you would like to come in and say something. And when I unmute you for you to be able to say something, you're welcome to turn your video on as well if you would like. So it just allows for a little bit more interaction versus Facebook, where all I've got is the comment section to read from. And sometimes I find the comments pop up not in sync with what we're talking about and whatnot. So it makes it a little bit more awkward. So, anyways, if you know anybody that you think would be really great for the book club, would really be able to resonate with the style of books that we're looking at, as well as the idea of being held accountable to find that time for self care and sit down and actually read these books, then please go ahead and let them know. I've put the link for how you can join for free in the description. And of course, you yourself, if you have not yet registered for free, go ahead and do that as well. All right, so on with the show. So we are looking today, let me just close this off here. All right, so we are looking today at Gabby Bernstein's book, Super Attractor. Now, this is a new book of Gabby's. So, this is obviously one of the new books that's in the repertoire for me as well. So, this was my first time reading this book as well. So, when I recommended it and decided to do the book club on this book, I didn't know if it was really going to be a moving experience, right? And sometimes you've got to take a chance. But I follow Gabby Bernstein closely. I consider her a mentor of sorts, even though she doesn't know who I am. And I have read her book Before the Universe Has Your Back. And I love her work. So I thought, you know what, we really can't go wrong here. And I was right. So Super Attractor, as you might guess, and of course if you've read it, then you know is really a book about manifesting. So there's a lot in the world about manifesting now. I mean, I know certainly in all of my social media feeds, there's at least 10 things a day that pop up on different accounts about how to manifest your dream life. And I talk about this as well. And so I think this is a really apt book for us right now, especially with COVID still going on, the pandemic and whatnot, because the message behind this book is really about being able to be in alignment with universal energy, being in alignment with yourself and your higher self. And that it's okay when you step out of alignment, that when you allow fear to start running the show again, that's not the end of the world. The sky isn't falling. And in fact, if we can catch ourselves when that happens and sit back and look at it with love and be grateful for that opportunity to see what has happened, be consciously aware of it, and then start to make conscious new decisions to gear us back towards love, then it's always a learning opportunity, and it's always a great reminder, because everything that we do every day is based on habit, really, right? And so even when you follow spiritual principles and you've got a real strong attraction and connection with your higher self and universal energy and whatnot, such as Gabby and such as myself, there's still times, many times, that you actually find yourself just out of habit going into a place of fear. And there's no greater time than that, than something like COVID, right? A big life change like this. And so it's really important to not beat ourselves up for having these types of reactions and instead be able to embrace them and again look at them through aware eyes and be able to guide ourselves back to love. So now, I'm just gonna read the first passage that I highlighted from Gabby's book, which is not right at the very beginning, but still, her idea of being a super attractor. She says, being a super attractor means that what I believe is what I receive. I can co create the world I want to see by aligning with good feeling emotions and directing them toward my desires. I can tap into an unlimited source of creative energy and contribute inspired ideas, offer wisdom, receive abundance, and feel free. And best of all, I can harness this power into a force for good in the world. So I love that passage, right? And I love it for several reasons. I mean, one, I find I get goosebumps when I read it, and I find that it really resonates with me. But I also love that very first sentence, that being a super attractor means that what I believe is what I receive. Because she goes on in the book to talk about the importance of watching your thoughts, basically, and being aware. Because whether you are focusing on what it is that you don't want, or whether you're focusing on what it is that you do want, you are attracting to you. Your thoughts are going to become your reality. So especially in a time of great upheaval, a great change, when fear has the ability of popping into our lives, like in COVID with this pandemic, but if you're going through any kind of life change, right? We just got a new puppy in our house. If you follow me on social media, you know that we've had this puppy for just over a month now. Well, actually, almost 2 months now. Gosh, time flies. But that is a big upheaval in our lives. And even though it's a wonderful upheaval that we are so grateful for, of course, there could be times of stress and overwhelm that we can allow ourselves to slip back into a place of fear rather than a place of love. And same sort of thing, you know, if you are having your first child, when Gabby was writing this book, she was pregnant with her first child. And so as she finishes the book, she's literally just in her last stage of pregnancy. And so she has this big unknown that she is facing in labor and childbirth and, you know, bringing in a new life into this world. And so it's important for us to look at ourselves with grace and acceptance and beauty and realize that we are going to falter, and that is all right. This the point of manifesting our dreams and living in alignment is not about being perfect, right? And in fact, these little times when we step off our path are actually great opportunities to help us to actually propel even more forward, because they offer us with great lessons. And one of the things that Gabby reminds us about in this book, Super Attractor, is that we are spirit having a human experience. And I love that. I love to remind myself of that many times, right? We are spirit having a human experience. And oftentimes I hear people who are on a spiritual path and looking for, you know, increasing their spirituality and learning more, as getting that reversed and thinking they are a human having a spiritual experience when they first learn to meditate and go within and have a connection with self and universal energy. But it is the other way around. We are spirit having a human experience. And so I love to remind myself of that in all the times that things are not working out exactly the way that I had planned, and I start to be hard on myself about that. This is the thing that I always say to myself, to allow myself to forgive myself for whatever my actions or reactions or thought patterns or whatever was. And Gabby goes on to talk about forgiveness in her book many times, actually. So I will remind myself, Lisa, you are a spirit having a human experience. So to me, what that means is part of the human experience is to step off your path, to get it wrong sometimes, so that you can learn from that experience, right? And have an even deeper connection with yourself and universal energy. So Gabby talks about in all of her work as well as this Super Attractor book is that manifesting what it is that you want in your life isn't just about sitting down and getting clear about what you want and then kind of saying, all right, this is what I want. I'm going to put all these images onto a vision board and I'm going to look at them all the time. And just by, doing something like that, thinking that this is what I want and looking at pictures of them, that I'm going to manifest them. So, what Gabby fully believes and I think expresses beautifully in this book is the need for alignment, that you need to be in alignment with that which you want. And that to have that alignment, you have to be having fun in your life. You have to experience joy. And you have to make sure that your emotions and your thought processes and your behaviors are all in alignment with what it is that you want, right? So you don't have to be happy all the time, but she brings up an emotional scale that she talks about quite extensively, anyways. That which I won't go into too much detail, but on the emotional scale is basically lower vibe emotions working your way up through higher vibe emotions. And that if you're going to manifest, you've got to be in a higher vibe state. But you don't have to get down on yourself. If you realize you're in a lower vibe state, it's not always possible to just whoop, leapfrog over to something. You can't be in a state of desperation and feeling depressed and sad and angry and any of that kind of lower vibe, and then all of a sudden just shoot up out of nowhere into feeling joy and love and acceptance. And you can't always do that. And in fact, most of us can't do that at all. It's a sliding scale. And so she really embraces the fact, and it's one of her big teachings in this book, is that in order for us to manifest, we need to be experiencing joy, a higher vibe frequency, emotion. And in order to do that, we have to first have awareness for where our emotions really are. And then we have to realize that when we're in a lower vibe emotion, we can always make another choice. And that doesn't mean to say that you can sit there and be like, I don't want to be sad anymore, and poof, all of a sudden you're not sad. It's not that. It's you can make a choice to distract yourself from what it is that's making you desperate or depressed or sad, right? So you can distract yourself by going and exercising or going and calling a friend or doing something that brings you joy, that makes you feel loved and accepted or makes you feel better or just distracts you from what it is that you're obsessing over, basically, right? And by doing that, you automatically will shift yourself out of that vibration. And you might not shift all the way out to this really high vibration, but at least you're moving your way up the vibrational scale, if you will. And she gives a really beautiful example, actually, of how she helped a little 9-year-old boy do this. And I really love this example because it really goes to show that even though somebody comes to us and they're struggling and we really want to help them, it's our best friend or it's our child or, somebody, even a client, and we really want to help them. And we kind of feel like when somebody expresses their problems to us that it's up to us to fix it, right? And she really tells a beautiful story that helps to cement this idea of this little boy who was fixated and really in despair because he didn't get on, I think it was a baseball team tryout that he was going for, something along those lines. And so she was visiting her friend whose son this was, and when she realized that the son was really feeling in despair, she didn't go and try to tell him a bunch of jokes and cheer him up. She didn't go and try to get him to look at the beauty of this and try to flip this around and see the positive. She just asked him a few questions that allowed him to move himself out of despair and into anger and into blame. And even though those are still lower frequency vibrations that you eventually want to come out of, they're higher frequency than the despair that he was in. So even though now he's angry that he didn't get picked and he's now blaming the coach for it being unfair that he didn't get picked, he's moving along the scale, along this emotional scale, right? And they ended up spending the whole day together as two families. And by the end of the day, her husband was talking to this same boy about something that he really loves, like trucks or something like that. And so by the end of the day, this boy was talking about something that he absolutely adores, puts a huge smile on his face, and he was clearly in joy, a high frequency vibration. Now, yes, that took all day for that to happen. And yes, a lot of that was purposeful on the part of Gabby and also her husband. But a lot of it was also able to just flow naturally. And all of it was at the hands of the boy himself, right? Through just prompting him through questions, allowing him to guide himself out of despair into anger, and out of anger into blame, and eventually out of blame up through several more ladders of the emotional scale, and eventually into joy, right? And none of it was based on giving advice or anything along those lines. It was all allowing him to pull himself out just naturally. And so I really love that because she refers back to this emotional scale a few times more, talking about how we can do the exact same thing. And some of that comes down to just a choice. And again, the choice of not necessarily choosing to try to get out of despair, but maybe choosing a thought that makes you feel comforted, or choosing the best, what she describes it as throughout the book is choosing the best feeling that you can in that moment. So when you're feeling despair, you're probably not going to be able to think of and really allow yourself to feel something that brings you great joy, but you are probably going to be able to think of something, whether it's putting on some music that calms you or makes you feel loved, or something. You're going to be able to think of an antidote, or put on a song, or call a friend, or think of something funny that happened that maybe you won't be able to allow yourself to feel the whole entirety of that good emotion, but it'll allow you to distract yourself enough from the despair. And if you're really struggling with that, even, then you have another choice where you can literally distract yourself, right? Find whatever it is to actually be able to move out of that obsessive thought, right? So removing yourself from the situation. And she talks a lot about our past as well, and being able to forgive ourselves and forgive our past, release the past, and also release the future so that we can just be in the present, right? Because when we're thinking about the future, we're thinking about something that hasn't happened yet, and we're usually in a state of anxiety when we're thinking about the future. And when we're thinking about the past, then we're in a state where we are worried and we are anxious, and right, because we're thinking about how much better things would be if we just would have done this different, but we don't have the ability to control that. It's done, right? So forgiving ourselves and honoring what's happened in the past, and releasing what it is that we are worrying about, obsessing about, tripping over, as she calls it, or even planning for the future. And the moment, she says, the moment you forgive your past, you clear space for the present, and an energetic shift occurs. And here's the really exciting thing. At this moment right now, you're perfectly on track. So when you can find yourself in this present moment, not thinking about the future, even 1 minute from now is the future, in this moment, not worried about the past, even the last thing that I just said, that's the past. This moment right here, in this moment, you're right on track. So what I love, one of the main things that I love about this book is how Gabby goes into all of this detail about sometimes the hardest time for us to be able to manifest is when normal life just kind of takes over, right? When we are struggling with different things, when we try to manifest something, it tends to be when things don't, they're not going the way that we had hoped them to go. Let's face it, right? That's why we sit there half the time and we try to manifest our way out of it, right? And so she says that if there's a lot of issues in your life right now, the first thing that we should be doing is thanking them. The issues in our lives offer us a choice. We can let them take over, or we can let them help us pivot towards grace. So whatever you decide is your choice, but to start by thanking those difficult moments, whatever it is that we're facing, shows gratitude and shows a willingness to be able to learn and heal and grow from them and take any opportunities that might be there. And the moment we choose to perceive our pain as the catalyst for great healing and growth, we realign with the power of the universe. This gratitude helps you get out of the feeling of being the victim and into a state of positivity. So, I mean, we've heard about gratitude all over the place, right? And she has a whole chapter that's dedicated towards basically appreciation and how starting the whole day in an appreciative state, right? So starting your day with a journal at your bedside so that when you first wake up, you start to actually write down all the things that you are appreciative for on this day, right? And you can continue this going forward as you're getting ready for your day. You can keep going over an affirmation or positive intention that has to do with appreciation and gratitude, because it's that whole idea that the universe is listening. And so whatever you're focused on is what the universe wants to give more of to you. Now, she clarifies in here, it's not the actual words, it's the feeling that's behind them. So she has had a lot of people, and I have as well, who have said, okay, so I'm facing a difficult time in my life, and you're telling me that you want me to find things to be grateful for, because the universe will hear that and will give me the things that I'm looking for. But if I'm saying that I'm grateful for this difficult situation, doesn't that mean that the universe is going to think that this is what I want in my life? That I want to have more of this difficulty, and so then the universe is going to keep giving me difficulty? And it's no, when we show the gratitude, right? First of all, we're being specific with our appreciation. We're not just going to say, I'm grateful for this difficult time, end of. We're going to say something like, we're grateful for this difficult time because, right? It's allowed me to see this. It's allowed me to realize this. It's allowed me to increase my love for this. It's allowed me to heal this. Those types of things. We're going to get really specific about what it's afforded us, what it's allowed us, right? So that is what we are showing gratitude for, not necessarily the actual difficulty itself. But it's not that the universe is going to hear us say that I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to heal this part of my life. And the universe will say, oh, excellent, she wants more healing. Let's just pile all of this garbage on so she can heal all of it. It's about the emotion that you are exuding. So when you are showing gratitude for something and you are really wholly and truly appreciative for that thing, whatever it is, you can't help but feel joy towards that, right? You can't help but have a smile on your face when you are thinking about something that you really truly are grateful for, right? So if you say something like, I'm so grateful for my children, the universe isn't going to hear that and give you more children. Right? The universe is going to hear that and give you more to be grateful for, to give you more of that joy, that love, that compassion, all of that that you're feeling when you think, I'm so grateful for my children, and all of the kind of behind the scenes emotion that that brings up, all that love that comes up. That is what the universe hears. It hears the emotion of what you're saying, not the words, right? So it's the emotion that it will send more towards you. So it's going to send you more love. It's going to send you more things to be appreciative for, more joy, more happiness, more contentment, more love, all of that. Right? So that's a really important point that I think was really necessary. And I'm so glad that she brought up in this book, because I know there's so many other people that think the same sort of thing. Right? And this is one of the big reasons why she is saying, and I say as well, and so many others say as well, that you want to be focused on what you want more of, not what you don't want. You don't want to be sitting there saying, oh, I want to manifest, not having an empty bank account. I want to be able to pay my bills, and not have to worry about that. There's a lot of knots in there because it's focused on the negative. It's focused on the empty bank account, on the not being able to pay the bills, right? And so that brings up an energy of lack, of disappointment, of despair, right? Of need. And that is what the universe will hear and respond to and give you more of that emotion. It'll give you more lack. It'll give you more despair, more disappointment, more need. Whereas if you can flip that switch and say, even when you don't have a lot of money in your bank account, right? So I remember days when I didn't have money in my bank account. I was going to be overdrawn to pay my bills, but I had overdraft protection. And so that's what I would focus on. I wouldn't sit there and say, I'm so grateful I have overdraft protection, because again, I'm kind of bringing in the fact that I have debt. But it was, to me, I would just change that in my mind before I started the gratitude and the thought and putting my energy in there. And I would just say to myself that basically having that overdraft protection was like having a loan. It was like having money. And so I was so grateful to have that opportunity, because now my bills are paid. I am so grateful. It's such a wonderful feeling to be able to pay my bills and not have to worry about that. And that I am so looking forward to being able to pay my bills freely without any issue, right? And having money in my bank account. I'm so grateful for that. Rather than focusing on, I only have $1 in my bank account. How am I going to pay my bills? I don't want this. Oh my God, I must manifest some more money, right? The difference between that. So, what I love about this book as well is that Gabby gives a lot of different techniques for us to be able to help ourselves and get into a greater alignment and catch ourselves when we've fallen off track and be able to get ourselves back on track. So the first thing that she talks about is the 3-step choose again method. And this is super simple. I've actually already talked about some components of this. Super, super simple. She brings it up with several different examples all throughout the book, and you'll see why in a second. Excuse me. Okay, so the first thing for the 3-step choose again method is you have to notice the thought. So if you notice that you've had a negative thought, for example, right, or a thought that is not quite in alignment, right, you're focusing on the negative, you've slipped into fear, whatever it is, doesn't matter. The first step is nice and simple. Notice the thought. This is what I always talk about in almost every single live that I ever do, is awareness. Have awareness of what it is that you're doing. Okay, so notice the thought. The second step is to forgive the thought. So this is the thing that I think is the hardest thing for a lot of people, because when we notice that we've slipped off our path, or we've fallen back into fear, or we are out of alignment, or we have focused on the negative, or whatever it is, we didn't react the way that we really wish that we would. We're not that proud of what our reaction was, or we slipped back into speaking negatively to ourselves, or whatever it is, we tend to beat ourselves up for it, right? We tend to judge ourselves. We tend to compare ourselves against other people. And what Gabby is saying is we need to notice the thought that we've had and then forgive it, right? So forgive ourselves for having the thought and forgive the thought itself, right? It's about honoring the fact that, you know what, the thought came up, it's brought something to my attention. I'm grateful for the fact that this has been brought to my attention, but I'm actually allowed to let this go. I don't have to focus on this. I don't have to beat myself up about the way that I behaved or how I chose to react or whatever it is. It's happened. I forgive myself. I forgive the thought and the action and the circumstances and all of that, so that I can choose again. And that's the third step. And that's the one that I've talked about already in our book club here, is choose again. So I use the choose again in terms of that emotion scale that we were talking about, with despair being on the lower vibe and joy being on the higher vibe. How you can choose again, whether you're choosing to distract yourself altogether from whatever you're obsessing over, or you're choosing to think about the greatest feeling thought that you can in that moment, right? So what's the best thing that I can think of in this moment. Okay. So, again, the first step is to notice the thought, bring awareness to it. The second is to forgive the thought. Say something like, "Thank you for revealing to me what I don't want so that I can clarify what I do want." Right? So, I notice that I've slipped back into a thought pattern of lack and fear, thinking about money, for example. Thank you for bringing this to my attention and reminding me of what I don't want so that I can now focus on what it is that I do want and make that new choice. Make the choice to figure out how you can take whatever it was you were thinking negatively about and flip it around so that you could turn that into what it is that you do want. How can I create a positive intention, a positive affirmation, a positive thought that I can focus on what it is I do want, right? So like in the case of COVID, right? Of course there are so many people that are like, I don't want to be in lockdown anymore, right? And of course restrictions have been easing and whatnot, but a lot of us are still in in a different life experience than what we were having pre-COVID. And there's still a little bit of pushback from that from a lot of people, understandably. And so if you catch yourself thinking about what you don't want, I don't want to be stuck in my house anymore. I don't want to work from home anymore. I don't want to, right? First thing is to realize that you're having the thought, right? Notice that you're having the negative thought, that you're focused on what you don't want. Forgive yourself and forgive the thought for that. Look at it as, thank you for bringing this to my attention of what I don't want, and I'm going to clarify now what I do want. So is it that I don't want to work from home anymore, meaning I do want to work outside of my home, that I do want to go to the office? Or can it get even more specific that I want to have the choice on days that I choose to work from home versus days that I choose to go into the office, right? Right, and you start to break it down for whatever works for you. What is it that you really do want? And then you choose again. So the choosing again comes down to your behavior, right? And how you're looking at it. So the thought pattern that you're choosing, if you notice that you're on the negative end of the emotional scale, you can always at any time choose again. And again, if you're just tuning into this, I don't mean to say that if you're feeling despair, you can just choose to feel joy, but you can choose to distract yourself from whatever you're obsessing over that's causing the despair. Remove yourself from that situation, call a friend, go out for a run, whatever it is, cook a really lovely meal. Maybe that's what you love, read a book, whatever. And take yourself away from that experience so that you're not focused on it anymore. That's what you've chosen, right? You've chosen again. Or you can choose to think of what is the best feeling thought that can come to my mind right now. And if you're in despair, that best feeling thought might be anger. But you know what? Anger is higher up in the emotional vibe chain than what despair is. So you can feel anger. And then when you're ready, you can do the same thing and you can choose again. And we're going to let anger go and we're going to move up again. And she does have in her book, Gabby has in her book, the actual scale for the emotional scale. But I think that she took that scale from Abraham Hicks, if I remember correctly. She does refer to that quite a lot, Abraham Hicks. So if you haven't heard of that, that's actually going to be one of our next books that we're going to look at, is from Abraham Hicks. All right. So thank you, universe, for guiding my thoughts toward good feeling emotions. That's what you're choosing again. You're choosing to thank the universe for this opportunity to be guided towards good feeling emotions. All right. So I'm going to skip through because I'm cognizant of time. So I just want to skip through. So I've talked about starting your day off right so that you're starting with positive habits to align yourself as soon as you wake up. So having our journal that's next to our bed so that we can write down all the things that we are grateful for, right? If you actually do this at night before you go to bed, then you might find that when you wake up in the morning, you have even less resistance going on in your life. Okay. And so I'm just going through my notes that I took here. and just making sure that I cover the main things that Gabby talked about in here, mainly the tips that she is giving, the strategies for you to use. So she talks about a whole lot of things in this book, and one of the things is the think it to feel it method, right? And that is, I mean, it kind of is a little bit self explanatory, I think, but the think it to feel it method lets you borrow a moment of happiness that you're able to identify with and apply it to a situation where you're otherwise struggling. So, how I how I used to say this all the time was fake it till you make it, right? And anybody that's watching this that knew me when I was back in Canada, particularly when I was a choreographer, that is what I said all the time to people learning my new dance moves, right? Fake it till you make it. If you make the mistake up on that stage, you own that, so it looks like all the other 24 people up on that stage did it all wrong in unison and you were the only one that did it right. Right, so this is kind of the same idea. And so the premise is that, again, if you're down here in despair and the goal is to move up into joy so that we can have that alignment with universal energy and we can be manifesting more joy to ourselves, then sometimes what we have to do is tell ourselves something that we don't necessarily believe in that moment. But we don't want it to be, way out of left field that we could never resonate with. We want it to be something that we would be able to identify with and be able to apply it to that situation. So I'll give an example that's different from this emotional scale, right? So if you are finding that you are really unhappy with your body, for example, right, and you really would like to get more fit, but every time that you've tried to do that, you have faltered in the past or it just hasn't worked out the way that you had planned. And so now you feel like trying to go and change your lifestyle in terms of your activity levels and your eating healthy is for nothing, and that you're just going to feel like you failed again. And so you're reluctant to do that. So you're in this kind of feeling of despair and pitying yourself and feeling like a failure and whatnot. And so it's not about looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, damn, I'm fine. But you're not going to believe that, right? Because that's so far removed from where you are right now. But we can find something that you're able to actually look at and identify with that brings out a greater feeling of happiness, and continue to apply that over and over and over until it actually is really 100% true and you're able to start using that in another sense. So, for example, it could still be focused on your looks. It could be that, okay, you're unhappy with your body, but you've just learned a new way to do your makeup and you're actually really enjoying it. It's making you feel really awesome and sexy and you're loving it. So, that can be what you focus on. It's not exactly your body, but you're focusing on that, saying, you know what, I feel really good when I apply the makeup this way, and I feel like I have healthier skin, and right, and you can start vibing with that healthier, happier energy. And then once you are there and you're really actually, you don't have to convince yourself anymore, you're feeling it when you're putting on your makeup, then you can start and bring up that same high vibe for something else, right? And I think, as Gabby explains in this book really nicely, is that it doesn't have to be anything to do with your body. It doesn't have to be the same thing that you're feeling the negative thoughts for, right? You can distract yourself with other thoughts that make you feel like you are a healthy person. So it can be focusing on the things that you're doing for your spiritual health, your emotional health, your mental health, those types of things that you can see progress and that you can say, okay, I don't believe it in the beginning to say I am healthy, but I can actually start to see some progress there, right? And so I'm going to focus on that, which will build that up more and more. So she says we need to affirm how we want to feel. Then we need to allow ourselves to feel those feelings. We need to allow the flow of universal guidance, right? This is the big thing, is we need to allow ourselves to be open to what other people might call just coincidences, right? Other people that might not believe in this type of thing would would say, well, these are just a series of coincidences that happen that were going to happen anyways. And you might be one of these people as well. And so it's about opening yourself up to say, you know what? This is universal guidance here. I am being guided by universal energy, by my higher self. That is what the coincidence is. So she says, as soon as you start repeating your affirmation and focusing on feeling good, you'll begin to notice the universe supporting you. In an instant, the universe can sweep in and rearrange your perspective. The moment you surrender your fear to the universe, love takes over. Your only job now is to let love come through. Welcome and trust in every single feeling of support and every moment of synchronicity. The more you embrace the wonder of universal guidance, the more it will show up in your life. What you believe, you will perceive. And the next step in this is to make feeling good a practice. That's basically what she's saying all through the book, is that you need to feel good. When you're feeling good, you are joyful. When you're joyful, the universe is giving back that which you are putting out, more joy. That's ultimately what we're trying to attract to ourselves, right? Give yourself permission to feel good. I know that that sounds really weird, but Gabby does describe it really beautifully, is that oftentimes we have this kind of backwards thinking of, oh, it's too good to be true, or the other shoe is going to drop, or and we allow our ego to take over, and our ego is all based on fear, right? Our ego can't survive without fear. So it's natural then when things are going really well that eventually our ego is going to chime in there and bring fear to the table, and that's going to have us slide back out. So bring ourselves back in by giving ourselves permission to feel good. Watch your words and the words of others. So you don't want to be gossiping, complaining, judging, putting yourself or other people down. All of these types of things weaken your vibrational alignment with the universe. So if you notice that the people around you are doing these things, you can always bring it up with love. You can always ask to change the subject. You can always respectfully leave the conversation. And you can always decide that you are going to start to bring other people into your circle, people who are vibrating at a higher vibration. And this fear comes back in with Gabby's 3-step process with her choose again method, which again, notice that fear, forgive the thought of fear, and allow yourself to choose again. So I'm just going to skip through. So she talks in this book about several different blocks that are very common for us. So I'm just going to go through the names of the blocks because I think for the most part they're all pretty self-explanatory. So the first big block is believing in lack, right? So that again, self-explanatory. Block 2 is thinking that there's not enough to go around. Block 3 is comparing ourselves to others. Block 4 is the need to win at the expense of having fun. And block 5 is fearing rejection. Block 6 is having a need, more mentality. And block 7 is the fear of being judged. So all of these 7 blocks are the blockages to being able to manifest what it is that we want, right? So needing to believe in lack, right? Thinking that there's not enough to go around, right? Let's look at business for that one in particular, right? You've got an idea for your business. Maybe it's a new product, a new service, whatever, and you see that there's somebody else that's offering something, and you automatically sit there and say, oh, well, it's been done. That's it. And you dismiss the idea of doing it yourself, forgetting that there are 7 billion people on the planet, that this one person, first of all, can't serve everybody, and 2, isn't going to resonate with everybody, because your story and what's brought you to this table and what you do is different from what brought this person to the table. And so you're naturally going to attract other people who are going to be able to resonate with you. And even though you're doing something very similar to them in a business capacity, there will be people that will resonate with them and not you, and vice versa. there is more than enough to go around. Same thing with money. Gabby brings this up with money in the book quite a bit, where we're thinking that there's only a certain amount of wealth to go around, or only a certain amount of happiness, or a certain amount of love, or whatever, right? And so there is more than enough to go around, right? Comparing ourselves to others, I think, is the big obvious one, right? We do that a lot without even realizing. And the fear of rejection and the fear of being judged, I think, are two really big and obvious ones as well, right? And our vibes attract our tribe. She talks about embodying an energy of lack and self judgment sends out a message to others that we don't feel good enough or worthy of what we desire. That energy can be felt miles away. The people in our lives, especially those who are closest to us, can be great spiritual teachers because they reflect back to us the energy we're putting out. So if you notice, again, like I was saying, that your circle of friends, your coven, if you will, is very negative, that they gossip a lot, that they do a lot of judgments, that a lot of comparisons, things like that, and this is kind of the norm within the group, that if this is your close circle, this is a great mirror that's being held up here. Maybe you're not physically taking part in gossiping, but there's something that this group is trying to show you so that you have the opportunity to surrender that, let it go, and make a different choice. So it could be that you are being very judgmental, and maybe not even towards other people. Maybe your judgment is towards yourself, right? So it's not just about saying, okay, I want to surround myself with people that are vibrating at a higher frequency, but it's about recognizing that if you do have people that are vibrating at a lower frequency, it's because you've attracted them to you. And so look at that as a mirror being held up for you. What is this an opportunity for you to work on and being able to move past? And as you lift your vibrational energy, chances are they will as well. And if they don't, then that's where it's a perfect opportunity for you to start bringing in other people into your circle who are now at your new level. All right. Gabby also has the universal abundance method, which is absolutely fabulous. And she talks again about Abraham Hicks in this abundance, what is it? The universal abundance method. And so she says one way that you must protect your desires is by creating clear, loving boundaries with anyone who resists them. We know we've all had people in our lives where we come up with a great idea for something and they are quick to point out the things that could go wrong, right? They're the pessimists in our lives, and we need them as well as we need the optimists in our lives. You might be one or the other, right? There is a place for everyone. But if you're finding that pessimist, for example, is bringing a very negative vibe to you and causing you to start slipping into fear, then it's time for you to create clear, loving boundaries, right? And that might be a physical boundary, or it might be more of a mental boundary for yourself to not take on the thought patterns of that person and allow yourself to go and look at it the same way that they are looking at it. All right, so she suggests that we focus on giving rather than getting, and we want more for others. That this idea that if there's people in our lives that have the things that we want, that chances are there's a part of us that's a bit jealous or a bit envious, and that's normal. But that if we actually allow ourselves to be envious, we are again showing the universe a negative vibration that the universe will bring back to us. Whereas if we allow ourselves to truly and wholly celebrate with those people for whatever it is that they've managed to accomplish, and we can really celebrate coming from a place of love, then that is the energy that we will be vibrating with. And that is what we will be sending out to the universe to say, I want more of this. So in order for us to receive something that's similar, that our friends or our family or our mentors and gurus are being able to manifest, we need to really be able to be wholly and truly celebratory, right? And really expressive in how grateful we are that they have had this opportunity, right? All right, so I'm really cognizant of time and I've got a lot more to go through, but I would just like to skip to the bottom of what I've got here and talk about the last bit that Gabby talks about. So just give me one moment here because I've got 21 pages of notes. I know, ridiculous, right? So we have got Gabby's tips, which I've probably missed a few of them in here. So we want to be able to connect to the energy of spirit. We want to tune in through prayer. So Gabby says that when you pray, we temporarily suspend the limitations of our worldly mind and reconnect to the infinite wisdom of a divine guidance beyond your own. And that prayer is a pathway to surrender. And she gives a few different prayers as example that you can use, which is really lovely. So it's basically prayers to ask for guidance. And she actually has a whole chapter where she goes through the different types of archangels that we have, and that we want to make sure that when we're invoking our angels and guides, that we're making sure that we're bringing in only the highest of energy, because of course there's a lot of energy out there and a lot of spirits who will have passed, right? And they're not all necessarily vibrating at the highest energy. So she welcomes in her spirit guides of the highest truth and compassion, is how she says it throughout the book. So she says to let the guidance flow, right? Rely on a higher power, do less and attract more. So this one is all about not trying to force or control what it is that you want, but be able to decide on what it is that you want more of, right? Present that as a form of a prayer to your higher self, to your angels, your spirit guide of highest truth and compassion, and ask for guidance in this area, and be open to having that guidance, and then letting it go, not trying to force it. Right? Let spirit take the wheel, she says. Taking spiritually aligned action. So recognizing when you are actually being guided, and then act, and then again, let it go and wait for the next piece of guidance. And she's got her spiritually aligned action method, which is a few steps. So the first one is to make sure your desire is backed by inspiration and service. So this is a really great one, and I know that we're running out of time, so I'll just very quickly talk about this, right? So even if it is more money that you want, it's like, well, how does me having more money be in service to others? But no matter what it is that you're looking for more of, that you want to manifest, you can always find ways for it to be helpful for other people as well, right? So for me, for example, if I want to manifest more money, then I can sit there and I can think about how if I've manifested money, that's because I've helped people in the work that I do. And that goes right along with my purpose and my mission, right? And so there is my service right there. I don't have to go any deeper, but even if I wanted to, I could go deeper from that and say, with that added money, I'm able to help more people in a different way, because it provides opportunity for me to be able to grow as a business and how I'm able to reach other people, right? So always making sure that whatever it is that you want is backed by inspiration and service. Step 2 is to believe that the universe will deliver. Step 3 is to take action from a place of spiritual alignment. And step 4, my favorite, is to have patience. So Gabby has several stories that she goes through in the book that are really quite interesting. And one of them is how she had a desire to have an article published in the New York Times in a specific section there, and she got in touch with the person that she actually knows that writes for the New York Times for that style section, and pitched them the story. He seemed interested, and then she had to let it go. She had to have the faith that the universe was providing, right? She is spiritually aligned. She knew that if she could have this article written about what she would do, that it would really open the doors to how many people she would be able to reach and help. And that was the service-based part of it. And once she reached out and she did the work to pitch this, she sat back and that was it. She didn't contact this reporter again, this writer for the New York Times again. She didn't try to control it or force her will onto it. She sat back and allowed the universe to do what the universe is going to do, and she didn't question it, and she had patience. And it took over a year before the reporter got back to her, and when it was the right time, he did. He wrote the story, and it ended up coming out just before the launch of her book, and it propelled her forward. It was the exact right time. So I love these little stories that people can tell to kind of back up what it is that they're talking about. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that you enjoyed the book itself. And if you are a member of our free online book club, then I will be sending out an email shortly that will have the copy of this video, the link to YouTube for it, so you can go back and watch it anytime that you want. Feel free to continue to put in any comments that you have, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook, or just reply to the email that you will get and ask any questions that you have. And I have chosen our next book, but I will send an email out for you for those who are actual members of the book club and let you know what that book is, along with links in case you've never heard of it before or you don't have it. And again, if you're interested in being part of this book club on a regular 6-week basis, then go ahead and click on the link in the description, lifelikeyoumeanit.com/book-club. It is completely free, and it just pops you into my email list so that you can actually get notifications of when the next book club is, what the book is going to be, links so that you can get your hands on a copy of it, whether it's Kindle or an actual book, and then a reminder as we lead up to it. And then, of course, afterwards, the link for where this video is going to be so that you can refer to it as many times as you want. And again, our next book club in 6 weeks is going to be the last one we'll run on Facebook, and after that we are going to move to Zoom. So please come and join our book club. We always love to see more members. Thank you. Bless.